You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. A little bit shorter this week because we are, well, let's be honest, we're in the dead period of sports. That this time every year is the dead period among the major leagues here in the U.S. Obviously, we have the Summer Olympics going on, and that's what's been taking up all of my time. And, well, I'll talk about just some stuff here. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. As always, please do rate, review, like, subscribe, comment, whatever it is, wherever you listen. Share it around. I appreciate all of you doing that for me. It does mean a lot. And those shots of dopamine, they really help me each week. And that's because of you. So thank you very much. So let's dive into things. So first thing I want to talk about is a shocking retirement by one of BYU's best players. Ben Bywater announced this week that he had to medically retire from playing football due to a shoulder injury he sustained in the third quarter against the Kansas Jayhawks. And that's a really unfortunate and sad thing because this kid was good. He had a future on Sundays. He really did. And it hits a little bit closer to home because he's from my high school. He's from Olympus. He is a Titan, and he had to retire due to that shoulder injury. Now, you might expect me to kind of go in on BYU's medical staff, and you know what I am. Throughout the history of the BYU program, the medical staff at that school has been subpar. Period. End of story. If you look back in history of the myriad of injuries for different players that have derailed their careers, you can start with Luke Staley. You can move on to Taysom Hill. You can then move further on to Tanner Mangum. And if you just keep looking, you can find these great players who the medical staff kind of didn't do their job. And I think Ben Bywater, and I have nothing to base this on, there's no public knowledge of this, and medical records, as always, should be private. But he kind of falls into this, I guess, string of players. And if you've noticed over the past almost 3 decades of BYU football, there's that white-haired guy that comes onto the field when a player is injured. It's been the same guy, and it's only recently changed. Guess who was that guy on that field for Ben Bywater? It was him. And if you look up a documentary that was very well done about Luke Staley and why he dislikes the BYU athletics program, it is on YouTube. It is very well done. You can kind of see Luke Staley was destined to be a high round pick in the NFL draft. He is the only player in BYU history to win the Doak Walker Award for the nation's best running back. He did that in 2001. And in a late season game, I believe it was against Mississippi State, I could be wrong on that, he broke his ankle. The initial diagnosis from that medical team was a high ankle sprain. So they pushed him out again. Forced him to practice. Said it wasn't that big a deal. Well, guess what? It ruined his career. Just plain and simple. He didn't have the burst. He didn't heal properly, so he couldn't have the burst. He didn't have the speed or the power that he had when he won the Doak Walker Award. Same sort of thing happened with Taysom Hill. Until he got to the NFL, he could never stay healthy. And it was because of the training regimen and the recommendations of the medical staff. Tanner Mangum, his arm got screwed up. And the medical staff let him down. So there is a theme here. Now, this could all just be tinfoil hat theory from me, but in my time rooting for BYU as hard as I have, past, I would say 25-ish years, my mom would have to, Mama Spelunker would have to clarify how long, but I would say about 25 years. That's been a very common theme. And I think Ben Bywater hopefully is the last victim of that medical staff. But it's just a huge blow for BYU. He was a captain for the team. He was the best player on the defense. When he went down against Kansas, the defense suffered majorly. And now they have to kind of move on without a captain and without their best defensive player. We'll see what defensive coordinator Jay Hill has cooked up to replace him, because you always, as a good coach, you always have a sort of contingency plan if your best players get injured. You don't want it to happen, but you need to have something there if it happens. So hopefully Jay Hill has something, and luckily it happened at the very, very, very beginning of fall camp. So there could be something there. But it's unfortunate for Ben Bywater that his shoulder just couldn't heal, and best of luck to him in his future. But man, that's a blow BYU could not afford to have. But all right, so there's that. Moving on, let's talk about Lauri Markkanen and the Utah Jazz. So it sounds like this saga is about to reach its end. August 6th, if you're listening to this before then, is the deadline for the Jazz and Lauri Markkanen's camp to come to an agreement on a contract extension. If they cannot renegotiate until the end of this next coming season, which means Lauri Markkanen would be an unrestricted free agent. So that means he can test the market. So it's a big deal. And the reason why so many teams were in conversations with the Jazz is because Lauri Markkanen is that good, but also they figured that they could get him to sign a long-term deal with a trade. From what I've seen and what I've been hearing, the Golden State Warriors were the ones closest to a deal with the Jazz. The Knicks nibbled around a little bit. The Spurs were nibbling. But it was the Warriors who really caught the attention of Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge. But there were a couple of things that kept the Warriors at bay. First was the Jazz wanted a couple of more draft picks than the Warriors were willing to give up. And the Jazz also wanted Brady Pachimski, the first-round pick of the Warriors 2 years ago. They did not want to part with either of those, and that's kind of the standstill that those teams came to. Which means, since they couldn't come to an agreement with the Warriors, all the other teams in the NBA saw how much the Jazz wanted and decided to back off. And so the market has cooled on Lauri, which means there's going to be a contract extension. The Jazz don't want to lose him for nothing. And so if they can get him on a contract extension and maybe somehow do so with a little bit less money, they're going to do it. And that could also be attractive for teams at the deadline saying, hey, this is a perennial all-star. He is really good. He's on a controllable contract over the next X amount of years, and it's not going to break our bank. Let's go for it. That is what the Jazz are probably thinking. Lauri obviously just wants to get paid. So I have no problem with him doing whatever he and his camp do. Just hopefully they do it in a better way than Gordon Hayward's camp did back in the day. But it's different with Lauri Markkanen because the Jazz didn't draft him and develop him. They got him in a package, and it was more of, all right, what did we get? If we remember, the package, the highlight of the package obviously was the draft picks from the Cavaliers, but it was actually Colin Sexton that people were more excited about than Lauri Markkanen. But then Lauri took off into the stratosphere, and we find ourselves in the position we're in. So my thinking on this is the Jazz are going to re-sign him. They are going to get a deal done because they can't afford not to. And we'll see how that plays out over the course of the season because the Jazz are not going to be very good. Outside of Lauri Markkanen, the Jazz are not very good. They have a lot of promise. They have a lot of prospects, but they're not good. They're going to be tanking for Cooper Flagg or for someone else in this draft class, which is much better than this last one. But it looks like Taylor Hendricks, their top pick from not this past draft, but the draft before, seems like a bust. But it's so hard to say that when these guys are 18 and 19 years old. I don't understand the thinking of the NBA saying that this is okay. Because for every Kevin Durant one and done, you get 1 million Taylor Hendricks. So they need to fix that, and they need to change it. It's not fun for college fans. It's not fun for pro fans because pro fans never know what they get. Everybody thought Scoot Henderson was a sure thing. I did too. And he was not Rookie of the Year. Obviously, that was always going to go to Wembanyama. But even Wembanyama didn't turn the franchise around like everyone thought he was going to. The Spurs still wound up in the lottery. It's just, I could do an entire episode on this. I'm not going to bore you any further with it. Just with the Jazz and Lauri Markkanen, a deal is probably going to get done. And on the Jazz side of things, they're hoping they can get it done for a little bit less money than the max. And Lauri Markkanen's camp is just going to say, pay us the max, or we're going to walk. So the ball is completely in Lauri Markkanen and his camp's part of the court. So, all right. So that's it for the Jazz, as well as for the update on Ben Bywater. Let's move on to Real Salt Lake. They are playing in the Leagues Cup, which, if you are not aware, is a competition between MLS and Liga MX, which is the top league of Mexico, in sort of the North American version of, I don't want to say the Champions League, but I guess that's as close as you can get it. But not really, because it's every team pretty much plays in this, and they can't opt out. I believe it's the top... Right, so it's every team that qualified for the playoffs the previous season from MLS, and then for Liga MX, I believe it's the top half because there is 14 teams. I think 14 or 15. So that's kind of where we're sitting at here. Real Salt Lake did win their game. They did. They beat Atlas, the team from Mexico, who previously had beaten Houston, the other team in their group. So it's 3-team groups. It's 16 3-team groups, which, for all you math wizards out there, is 48 total clubs. And the top 2 from each group move through to the knockout stages. So you go from 48 down to 24, I think. Maybe 36. I don't know. 32? 32. And Real Salt Lake's in a good position. All they have to do is draw against Houston, and they move through. And I think it's a good thing. A lot of Real Salt Lake fans don't think it's a good thing that they're playing in this, or that it's a waste of time. It's more wear and tear on the players. Real Salt Lake is still very young. And so the more game time where the games matter is only positive. And there was an interesting report saying that there are some European clubs very interested in Andres Gomez. That just preaches to the system that manager Pablo Mastroeni and owner Ryan Smith have kind of made in Sandy, Utah, where they can develop talent, where top clubs in the world want their players. And the clubs that are interested are Celtic in Scotland. That's probably the best club in the Scottish Premier League. A couple of teams from the Premier League's lower part, which is still the best league in the world. So teams like Fulham and Wolverhampton have been looking at him. And then in the Bundesliga, you've got Borussia Dortmund, the club that has Gio Reyna and had Christian Pulisic, interested in this 21-year-old. That's amazing. That is so cool. And that just means that Real Salt Lake kind of has a secret sauce here. They do have a good scouting presence in South America because they got Gomez from Colombia. So this is very good news for anything that they're doing with their young guys. Diego Luna is drawing interest from Mexican clubs, which, let's be real, the Mexican Premier League, or whatever you want to call it, La Liga MX, Liga MX, whatever you want to call it, it's still a better league than MLS. And he's drawing interest. Obviously, Cristian Arango draws interest because, well, he's in the MVP conversation because Lionel Messi's hurt. Nobody knows how long he's going to be out, which leaves Luis Suarez and Cristian Arango for MVP. And if Cristian Arango comes back and just tears it up like he has been, I mean, what's to stop him from winning MVP? Being the first MVP from Real Salt Lake. Could be a second cup for Real Salt Lake if he can stay healthy. If you can't tell, I'm very excited about this club and the direction it's headed in. When at the start of this season, I was kind of humdrum about it. They're going to be bad, bottom of the table. We're going to have to sell some pieces and bring in young talent. Well, they kind of one-upped me there by not being bad. They're already using the young talent, and they're already making moves. They signed a young defender earlier this summer, which is one of my asks. The other one is to get more attacking help, but doesn't really seem like they need it anymore because they've got Diego Luna, Gomez, Anderson Julio, Nelson Palacio, and, of course, the MVP candidate, Cristian Arango. I know that was a lot of names, but those are names you should be paying attention to because they are all very good. So good news coming out of Real Salt Lake. I love it. Good stuff. Next up for Real Salt Lake is Houston Dynamo in the Leagues Cup. That is on August 5th, which is Monday. So pay attention to that if you can. It'll be on Apple TV, which means I won't be able to because I don't have an Apple TV subscription because, well, that's too many. All right. So that pretty much does it for the episode this week. I told you it'd be a quick one. When it comes to video games, I am still streaming over on Twitch. That is twitch.tv/mattscave, MATTS Cave. I will occasionally be streaming on YouTube, depending on if I'm going to be listening to music or not, because YouTube takes down the video if there's music on there for obvious reasons. So we'll see what happens there. And as far as the games that I'll be playing, I will be playing Final Fantasy XIV more. I'm almost done with the main story quest line, and then I will be moving on to leveling up different professions. Or not professions, but jobs is what they're called. But World of Warcraft: The War Within comes out later this month in August, so I will definitely be playing that. I have to familiarize myself with the new look of it all, with the warbands, and the login screen is even different when you choose, or not your login screen, but your character select screen is different, so I have to get used to that. It's all good, positive changes. It's just I need to play it to get used to it. So I'm not complaining about the changes. I just need to get used to them. And then other games that I'll be playing until I can afford a new capture card. There won't be any console games, so stuff like EA Sports College Football I will not be able to play. Maybe I'll be playing some Magic the Gathering Arena because I love Magic the Gathering. Maybe some Hearthstone, League of Legends. Who knows? It'll be a hodgepodge of games, but come on by, chat with me. A couple of you have already, and I appreciate it. It makes the stream much more fun for me. And until next week, I'll see you all when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.